how do you make sure that the brand story that has been crafted,
Mhm.
okay, makes its way into sales conversations? Because at the end of the day, I'm sure marketing as a function or the stakeholders at some point are going to say, how does this tie into an ROI to sales?
The marketing team and the sales team that work together, they should not be working in silos, and never. Because the sales team need to feel involved, and rightly so, because they are the one with the boots on the ground. They are the ones talking to customers and partners and prospects on a daily basis. So their knowledge is very valuable and can inform some of the marketing decisions. I think you're gonna be able to prove the ROI. So it could be the number of pieces of coverage you have per key spokespeople, for example. It could be a share of voice, it could be share of conversation, it could be website traffic, it could be social media engagements or mentions. There's a lot of different ways that you can demonstrate the ROI from doing media relations, or doing thought leadership essentially.
Today on Marketing Growth Fuel, we're joined by Florie Lhuillier, Senior Associate Director and Head of Cybersecurity at CCGroup, and a trusted expert in turning strategic communications into brand credibility. She's led global PR and marketing campaigns across industries, from entertainment and sports to enterprise tech and cybersecurity. At CCGroup, she's helping cybersecurity brands cut through the noise with storytelling that builds trust, defends reputation, and drives real commercial outcomes. Let's get started. Welcome back to Marketing Growth Fuel, the podcast where we go beyond funnels and frameworks to uncover the people and purpose behind great marketing. Florie, let's kick things off with something that still sparks debate in a lot of boardrooms. The role of PR. It's been always seen as that glossy brand layer, which you add once the campaign is done, or something reserved for press releases and thought places. But I think in 2025 that perception is changing, and it's changing fast. Obviously attention is getting a lot harder to earn, and trust is becoming the differentiator, and that's where I think strategic PR is coming into play. So I would love to understand from you, so because PR is not seen is often seen as brand stuff, and it's kind of nice to have, not tied to results. How do you respond to a room full of performance marketers?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is something that we constantly need to demonstrate, as a team and as an agency, because um, it's quite hard, obviously, to measure PR, right? A bit like analyst relations. But I think what I would do is I would show them what we show, our clients when going through the results from our work, which is, showing them metrics that are aligned with the business goals. The
Hmm.
business goals can be increasing brand awareness, it can be increasing a positive reputation, it can be generating leads. And I think those metrics, could include showing them, their share of voice,
Hmm.
as well. So what's their share of voice compared to their competitors? It could be their share of conversation as well. It could be the website traffic that's
Hmm.
coming from the coverage that PR is getting for them. It could be like social media engagement. So really, I think always tying back what you're doing with
Hmm.
the goals from the business. I think it's probably what's going to help you, make performance marketers understand the value of PR. And not
Hmm.
just performance marketers, also the boardroom, because sometimes in a boardroom they don't really get PR, and they don't understand the value.
And you make a strong case, right? So when you're showing metrics like share of voice, or like you said, direct traffic, obviously PR stops from being abstract, and then it becomes more accountable. Okay, but uh, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to get results like that, obviously it can't be an afterthought. Okay, so I'd love to understand, how can marketing leaders embed PR thinking right at the start of the campaign, or maybe and it happens in so many cases, right? After a campaign is launched, you'll say, we need to do some press releases.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, well, I think with any campaigns really, before you start a campaign, before you start thinking about it, you need to identify what you want the overall outcome to be,
Hmm.
for that specific campaign, but also I think the outcome for each element of that campaign.
Right.
So, for example, if the overall goal of the campaign is to raise brand awareness, then you definitely need to include PR, in what you are doing. And so the specific outcome for PR would be the headline that you're gonna want to see in an article written by a journalist,
Absolutely.
about this campaign. So, and I think from there you sort of need to work backwards, and that's what we tend to do. So, to get to that headline, you need to figure out, okay, what information do I need?
Hmm.
So if a campaign, for example, is going to be centered around a report based on, let's say, third party
Hmm.
research, so you're gonna go away and interview CISOs, then you need to be asking those CISOs, specific questions within the questionnaire in order for you to get the findings that's going to lead you to that headline.
Hmm.
Um, so really, I think you really need to make sure that you understand the overall outcome of the campaign to start with, to understand which tactics you are going to be using, and then you basically essentially need to work backwards and be like, okay, this is the outcome. Then to
Right.
get to the outcome, this is what I need to do.
And in your opinion, who do you think needs to be in the room for the PR to truly influence, the campaign narrative? Or and I'm also sure that there are a lot of people who are left out, but definitely need to be in the room.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends on the size of the campaign, right? And it depends on the size of the company. Some companies are going to have a much bigger marketing function than other companies, and then some CMOs might not necessarily be very familiar with PR. They might be actually very good at like demand generation activities, but actually PR is not necessarily something that they're familiar with. So I think obviously you definitely need to have, the CMO. You need to have your key spokespeople as well. I think in a room,
Hmm.
and you also need to have maybe like a head of comms, head of PR, or a marketing exec if you have these people that are sort of working for the company. And I think if you have the buy-in from like spokespeople,
Hmm.
which they make the best ego. They have egos, right? They like being in front of journalists. So if you get their buy-in, then it's gonna be a lot easier than to get buy-in from other people within the business.
So, from what I'm hearing is that obviously it starts with a lot of planning. Understanding what goals, what is the end outcome that we achieve. What I'm also hearing is that it's the right people with the right mindset. Across the marketing function, across the stakeholders that definitely need to be in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, to be able to activate, a PR campaign, right? And uh, okay, so then I think the that begs me to answer the next question. How do you make sure that the brand story that has been crafted, okay, makes its way into sales conversations? Because at the end of the day, I'm sure marketing as a function or the stakeholders at some point are going to say, how does this tie into an ROI to sales?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's important that the marketing team and the sales team that work together, they should not be working in silos, and never.
Hmm.
Because, the sales team need to feel involved, and rightly so, because they are the one with the boots on the ground. They are the ones talking to customers and partners and prospects on a daily basis. So their knowledge is very valuable and
Hmm.
can inform, some of the marketing decisions. So again, if we take the report based on like a third party research as an example, you should be asking for their input into the questionnaire. And when the report is done, the sales team should be briefed on the findings of the report and also the key messages
Hmm.
coming out of it. So you can make sure that as a marketer, the sales team is telling the right story and a consistent story as well with the one that you are telling on your social networks, on the website, in the media, through all of the different marketing channels that you are using.
And I think it's a great point because, like you said, uh, sales have the boots on the ground, and also I think they are the first people to sense when a message is landing or not landing.
Yeah.
So when you build a story, with some sense of a narrative, and you've aligned with its sales, I mean, they're the first ones who are going to tell you that if it's clicking or not clicking in the market.
Mm.
Okay. But then, what do you do when, the message or the narrative itself is flat, you know,
Yeah.
uh, and how do you fix that?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's I think an issue that a lot of companies come to us for. Especially in the cybersecurity industry, it's so crowded. There's just so many cybersecurity vendors that you need to have a sort of like a brand message that's just going to be different, right, from the rest of the competition. So, I think the thing that we would do is run a messaging session.
Hmm.
I think you really need to get under the skin of the business to first understand how they got to this brand message that's flat and not really working, but also identify what makes the brand unique and interesting. And when you know this, you're gonna be in a better position to be able to, to fix the problem.
Hmm.
And that session would need to involve, different stakeholders in order to get a variety of views and ideas,
Hmm.
and really get a grasp on, the background of the company, who the company is selling to, why its customers are buying their product and services and not those of a competitor. What are their USPs, etc.
Hmm.
And also, you need to understand how comfortable that they're going to be with certain topics versus others. There's one obviously right now that everybody's sort of talking about, but that can feel a bit risky, is geopolitics. With
Absolutely.
everything that's going on right now
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah.
Ukraine-Russian war, Gaza, Trump's tariff, etc., not all companies are necessarily ready to share their opinion about it. So that sort
Absolutely.
of session will sort of help you understand, okay, how bold, the company is willing to get and how risky the company is willing to get.
Hmm.
And I think it's also interesting, and we talked about that earlier with, the sales team being in touch with sort of like customers on a regular basis. I think you also need to run a few customer interviews as part of that messaging session to understand how the brand is currently being perceived.
Yeah.
What's currently working, what's not working, and then you're gonna be able to understand, okay, this is the feedback that we are getting from customers and partners. This is what we need to change.
And you made a very interesting point there, about geopolitics. And I'm just going to go go out on the limb and ask you, right? So when you work with brands today, uh, as a brand, there is a message, there's some PR strategy or communication strategy that's in place, right? And then
Hmm.
there could be, the things that are happening around. There could be war, it could be anything. Okay.
Hmm.
And sometimes audiences just expect brands to have an opinion,
Yeah.
right? And it could also be the case that the stakeholders have an opinion. It could be the CEO, it could be the CMO. And then I think at that really juncture of everything is where PR has to figure out what are we supposed to do, right?
Mm.
Because as you're thinking for the brand, right, at the end of the day. So how does then PR go through all of this and still find out a solution?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, but I think you just need to have a frank conversation, with people in the business, with the key spokespeople, with the marketing team. I think you just need to sit down as a team and
Hmm.
decide if this is something that you want to have an opinion about and a public opinion about, because you need to figure out if that might impact the relationship you may have with some of your customers.
Yeah.
If one of the sectors that you target as a company is like defense, for example, defense in the US, then might be risky actually to
Absolutely.
to be talking about geopolitics. You don't want to be on the wrong side of your customers. So yeah, I think it's very much like a sort of team decision that needs to be taken. And I
Hmm.
think the marketing team needs to make sure that their spokespeople are not just going to go out and then say things. which might have then some consequences on the brand's reputation.
So what I'm hearing is that obviously, as a I think as a brand or as a PR communications agency, or a team internally for that matter, whenever the right message has to be sent out, and it could be in the context of anything that's happening on the business front, or maybe on a geopolitical front, or any other front. Obviously, what you're saying is that you need to be able to have that discussion. You need to run those sessions where you're trying to figure out what is that messaging that we want to get across. Okay. And then I think that leads me to kind of move towards thought leadership, because thought leadership is a big part of messaging, right?
Yeah.
Specifically for brands, uh, and is often confused uh, with just content creation. But you and I both know that it's much more than that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
so you've obviously worked across, product launches. You've done a lot of brand storytelling. You've done C-suits, communications. Uh, in your opinion, which communication tactics do you think are, underused, but are very powerful?
Perhaps the first one that comes to mind is, I would say, case studies. And I think, look, in the cybersecurity industry, especially, I totally get that it's tough, to get case studies, right, from customers. Nobody wants to admit that they suffered a data breach or ransomware attack.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter if you can put the name of the brand, on the case study or not. I think as long as you can provide a real life use case
Yeah.
to prospects or people visiting your website, I think you've done half the job.
Hmm.
If like a let's say a CISO from a financial services organization goes on your website and see a case study that explains or sort of demonstrate how you sort of solution has helped prevent account takeovers, and
Hmm.
this is what he or she is experiencing at the moment, then that's perfect. You're going to capture the attention of that prospect. So I think, yeah, that's probably one that's being underutilized, because I think some marketers are probably a little bit worried of asking customers for doing a case study, or trying to involve them into what they do.
Hmm.
It's challenging, definitely, and I think it requires a lot of perseverance. But even just having one case study, I think, goes a long way.
No, I think I agree with you. I think a strong case study or a real life use case, if I was to put it that way, can really anchor a brand's story and establish more credibility. Especially when you're working with uh, executive content, where the stakes are high, you know. And at the same time, I'm assuming at some point during this entire process, you still have to maintain the balance between boldness and staying within the brand guidelines. So when you are crafting narratives, you're building that PR strategy. What's your process for balancing boldness and the brand safety aspect? And I think it ties into what we were speaking earlier, which was about geopolitical
Yeah.
content, or anything that's got to do with what's happening in the world today. But how do you manage balancing boldness and brand safety?
I think before you do anything, I think you should always agree with your clients how far you can push it. Understand what they're comfortable with, not comfortable with. I think that should be part of the onboarding process,
Hmm.
but also part of the process that you go through when drafting content. Some spokespeople, they might be more comfortable being bolder than others. So what we do, we always check when we have, let's say, like a thought leadership call with spokespeople.
Hmm.
If they're like willing to take risk, if they're willing to be bold,
Hmm.
and then how far we can essentially like push it in terms of like examples that we're going to be putting into the content, for example.
Hmm.
And then of course you always need to make sure you have a marketing person who's going to be involved on the client's hand to check that it's okay. But I think is yeah, that's something that you should definitely be talking to your clients about from the start, really.
Right.
um, and specifically with spokespeople.
And do you come across brands, who want to be really bold? And I mean, I'm
Uh,
sure there's a flip side to that as well, right? So there'll be brands who are highly conservative, and there are brands who are saying, okay, let's just be bold, because I think we are living in a world where everybody wants to bold gets you more attention in
Yeah,
many
no,
ways.
absolutely. I think more spokespeople than brands, I would say.
Mhm.
And I'm, I can't mention his name in particular, but this the former CISO of sort of with MSP and Cyjax, Ian Trump. He's a fantastic spokesperson. He's not afraid of saying what he thinks, and I think that's why the media loves him. Because sometimes you need to have people that are just going to tell you the truth. And yes, I would say more spokespeople than brand, definitely.
Obviously, being too bold has its own pros and cons, and being too conservative also has its own pros and cons. And I think if you're a part of the whole executive content, brand building aspect, then I think credibility is going to be the key. I think the second is going to be how consistent are you, right? So uh, sometimes there can be a lot of fatigue, and I see this today because I'm sure you are consuming a lot of content. Uh, but then, how do you address that fatigue as as a PR person?
Well, I guess, probably one of the sort of topic that people are sort of fatigued about is probably AI, right? At the
Absolutely.
minute. But no, so I think to keep it fresh, I think it's good to sort of like regularly organize thought leadership sessions with your different stakeholders, your different spokespeople, or not just spokespeople, but at least experts within the business.
Hmm.
And I think this is what we do for most of our clients. We do this on a quarterly basis or on a bi-yearly basis, depending of how much they've got to say.
Right.
But we try and speak to experts, fairly regularly, exactly to avoid thought leadership fatigue. Um, and so we try to also time it. So if we know that they're going to go to events, for example, so for example, right now in the cybersecurity world, it's like event seasons. You had UK
Absolutely.
you had UK Cyber Week, you had RSA, there's Info Security Europe coming up, then Black Hat, then DEF CON. Um,
Yeah.
if we know they've been going to those events, and we're going to try and have a conversation with them after they've been to those events because they may have heard or learned something new.
Hmm.
That's going to help us create some like new content and write about something different. So I think, yeah, definitely speaking to sort of experts within the business and
Hmm.
going to conferences, listening to podcasts really, really helps.
But at the bottom of all of this, the way I look at it, the question that every PR person and agency for that matter is going to get asked is, uh, where is the ROI? So, I
Yeah.
mean, and I think we discussed it briefly at the start, but I just want to stress more on this because I think for all our audiences, who are aspiring to be in this space, it is going to be one of the things that they will have to do throughout their career in many ways, or are doing at the moment. But I'd love to have a take on this.
Yeah, I think it just goes back to what I was saying. I think when we first started that chat, I think it's just you need to make sure that the metrics that you are showing they are aligned with the goals that the business is working towards. So if it's lead generation, brand awareness, changing your reputation because you had a bad reputation, you need to make sure that it's more positive.
Hmm.
I think, as long as the metrics that you show are aligned with that, then
Hmm.
I think you're going to be able to prove the ROI. So, it could be the number of pieces of coverage you have per, key spokespeople, for example. It could be a share of voice, it could be
Hmm.
share of conversation, it could be website traffic, it could be social media engagements or mentions. There's a lot of different ways that you can demonstrate the
Hmm.
ROI from doing media relations or doing thought leadership essentially.
Hmm.
That could be also how many events you've been speaking at. That's also that thought leadership.
Hmm.
It's speaking at events, it's speaking on podcasts, it's um, writing opinion articles that are being placed with the media. So there's lots of different ways that ROI can be measured on thought leadership.
Given the fact that we are in 2025, there is a lot of pressure on marketers today especially in the cybersecurity space, which you are an expert at because you handle so many clients across cybersecurity, at CCGroup. One of the things that has happened is budgets have reduced, okay, across the board, uh, and then all of them are coming back and saying that you need to do more with less. Earlier maybe you had like 5 years to deliver, maybe a larger set of KRAs or KPIs, but then you've smaller budgets and lesser time frames because moving so fast. So how do you do that? How do you approach it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we've seen it this year or the past couple of years. I think companies are more willing maybe to invest in like project based work as opposed to like retainers.
Hmm.
So we don't we used to basically answering that questions how you can do more with less essentially.
Yeah.
Um, Something that we do as an agency is that we are regularly surveying our clients' customers to make sure that we understand, how they actually buying, cybersecurity vendors, product and services, which channels are they looking at, which content are they reading.
Hmm.
And this is allowing us to basically put forward the most effective tactics, at a given time. So, we know that, okay, if you have a smaller budget, this quarter or this year, well, we know that these tactics are the ones that are working the best right now. So let's put all the budget towards that tactic. So
Hmm.
it could be analyst relations, it could be writing, blogs and thought leadership articles, rather than actually putting out press releases, for
Right.
example. It could be investing more in social media, as opposed to investing in other tactics. So this is how we sort of like make sure that we are always putting like a strategy that's going to be as effective as possible and that meets, the company's budget.
So what I'm hearing is obviously first you need to ensure that you're gathering insights from the right channels, what's working, what's not working across the board for
Yeah.
cybersecurity. Then obviously then you make the right investment decisions based on those inputs. Uh, so if I was to ask you today that if a cybersecurity vendor came to you, or maybe for a marketer or a PR person working in a cybersecurity company, uh, and his boss comes and says, we have budget only for this one thing in this quarter, uh, with regards to PR. Where would you tell them to invest it and why?
I think it really depends on what they want to achieve. If they want to increase their share of voice, then yeah, I will tell them you need to invest in media relations.
Hmm.
But if their goal is to generate leads quickly, then I would probably tell them that they probably need to invest in a paid LinkedIn campaign. So it very much depends on what they want to achieve. There's no one silver bullet, unfortunately, who can help with everything and all the goals in the world. But yeah, I think it very much depends on what they want to achieve at that moment in time, and then based on that, we would be telling them do this or do that.
And does it always or many times happen to you that when you're speaking to vendors, and I'm not saying cybersecurity in general, but then they really try and tie down all the PR spends to leads generated? Does that happen? Because I'm sure for a lot of marketers out there, in companies, at some point, that question is being asked.
Yeah, no, of course, and in many times, we've experienced that, or where they have decided to actually use all the PR budget and put this towards lead generation, and
Hmm.
it's like, okay, great, but do you actually have the content you need
Hmm.
to drive, the eyeballs, for the lead generation campaign that you are going to be, launching? Because if you don't have the news hook, if you don't have the right piece of content that's going to be attracting people to read it and engage with you and request a demo, then
Hmm.
that's not going to work really.
And obviously, we talked about fatigue, thought leadership fatigue, and the other fatigue that we touched upon was AI. Where do you see AI coming into the whole PR and media relationship space? How do you think it's impacted you guys, or marketers in general, PR professionals in general?
Yeah. I mean, I think, some of my colleagues do use AI. I personally don't like using it, but I think it's good to be using it if you're like, you're a bit stuck, for example, with the press release and you're not sure about the headline,
Hmm.
that gives you like some options. Or if you need to like summarize a conversation that you've had, I think that's definitely really helpful for that. But um, I would definitely not be using AI to actually create content because because of the inaccuracies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because usually, actually the jargon is just a bit fluffy as well.
Yeah, it
So,
is.
so I'm not a big fan of it. I totally understand how useful it can be,
Right.
to help you save time. And sometimes, if you're a little bit stuck, it might just provide you with some ideas and lead you in the right way. But
Hmm.
I would not definitely be writing content using AI.
I don't know if those tools are still available in the market, but I had come across a couple of tools which did end to end, and I was pretty shocked at uh, how they were doing it. To be honest, but they could literally just figure out, a press release, which could be, obviously it comes from a thought of the business itself, but draft the press release, just a but click a button and then it's published at many sites and you make some payments, etc., etc. But I was very
Yeah,
astonished. That's like, how do you ensure, in my opinion at least, I thought, how do you ensure that the press release that was crafted was, appropriated, went to the right channels, more specifically. Uh, but yeah, I mean, things are changing quite a bit. And on that note, I'd love to kind of change and shake things up a little more in our conversation.
yeah.
Uh, we've talked about strategic shifts. We've talked about, obviously fatigue. We've talked about AI. We've talked about, how cybersecurity and how PR functions in cybersecurity markets are evolving.
Hmm.
So I'd love to shake up things with a quick round of what we call as the this or that, the marketing mashup.
Okay, sure.
Uh, so it's a fun game that we play where we give you two options, and you're supposed to choose just one.
Okay, right.
No, so I don't want you to think much. Whatever just comes to your mind, just have a go at it quickly.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So the first one, thought leadership or demand generation,
Photo leadership, always.
crisis communications or campaign postmortem.
I would say crisis comes. I like the challenge. I like the thrill and the stress that comes with it.
One viral LinkedIn post or evergreen SEO content.
Evergreen SEO content. Yeah, I think you always need to think long term in marketing. So yeah.
Let's make it bold or let's keep it safe.
Uh, oh, that's a tough one. Probably let's make it bold. Yeah, I think life would be boring if you didn't take any risks, right?
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we touched upon this, but AI generated content or human crafted storytelling.
Well, definitely human crafted storytelling. Yeah.
Personally, for you, no social media access or no email access for a day.
No social media access. Yeah, I don't use social media that much. I definitely can live without it.
Punchy headlines or persuasive body copy.
Punchy headlines. Yeah, I think you need to have a punchy headline to attract eyeballs, and then you can make them read what you want them to read.
And this is a fun wildcard question that we had. Uh, if you were hosting a marketing therapy group chat, who would be the first people to get to rant? If I was to say, would it be PR, product, sales, or marketing?
Oh, I would say PR because I think the sales team would probably take up too much of the of the meeting. Sorry for the stereotype. And I think product is quite technical, so I think PR is probably a nice way to start. And yeah, usually go straight to the point.
Okay, fantastic. That's a wrap for today's episode of Marketing Growth Fuel. Once again, a huge thank you, Florie, for joining us today. Obviously, your insights on the power of strategic PR, and how marketers can truly build a real brand equity in 2025, will help our audiences a lot. So, thank you once again. Any parting thoughts?
No, but thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I hope obviously some of the things I have shared would be really helpful for marketers and especially cybersecurity vendors that are probably finding it challenging right now to make themselves different.
Fantastic. Thank you so much once again, Florie. It was a pleasure having you here.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app. Catch past episodes and more at techdogs.com. See you next time.